Welcome. By now you should have watched the macro tape that you have on the Pennsylvania system. And it was a good module to be selected because Pennsylvania has a very different community college system than we do in Maryland. And we're going to be talking about one of the Maryland institutions because many of you, I assume, will have something to do with Maryland. So we're doing a micro analysis of a particular community college in Maryland. It's an interesting example of how the Maryland system is established. First of all, Maryland has 16 community colleges, and they divide conveniently into 4 groups of 4. This community college is at the top of the bottom quartile, if you will, the bottom 4. And there's a good reason for us to pick that because it has a lot to do with budget and finance. So this is a community college that is unique in a number of ways. One of the ways that is unique is that it has the closest proximity to other states. It's very, very close to Pennsylvania, it's very close to West Virginia, and it's close to Virginia. We will talk more or less about that relationship between Pennsylvania and West Virginia because there is one. Virginia does not do a lot of business with this particular college. It is a single campus college. It has a single campus. It has a strong distance program. So they're not necessary right now for them to develop off-site locations. They have in the past done that, but right now they do not. As I said, it has a unique clientele. Part of it is because students from Pennsylvania can come to this Maryland school as out-of-state students and actually pay less than they pay to the closest community college in Pennsylvania. And West Virginia's community college is somewhat new, and it does not have as comprehensive a program background. So you will have some of those, like special engineering technology, special allied health programs, where they do come to this particular school because of its proximity, and frankly, the cost is still at the community college level, not at the university level. Should talk about its budget. Its budget is just a little bit unique. It obviously, just like every other community college that is a state institution, it has funding from the state. I'll talk later about that state funding system. It has a county funding system, which is interesting. Now, I told you that I'm going to call it Maryland Community College. The issue is I do not want to make a big thing about it, except that it does have a name not of the county. And yet the name that it has is not giving a single thin dime to the operation of the college, which has been a point of debate for at least, the college is coming up on its 80th birthday, and that's an issue that goes on constantly. And the other thing about it, it deals with both a federal, and we'll talk more about that later, and state and county budget. But what it does have that the others do not have, it is part of a regional funding organization called the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's not a lot of money, but when it comes to these days in community colleges, almost any money is better than none. So we'll go with that, and that'll be fine. The funding model, you've heard about several of them. North Carolina, for example, and to a lesser extent, Virginia, are top-down models. Much information comes directly from the state for the operation of the college, including budget. And so their finance procedures are very different. Maryland's budget system is a bottom-up system. And this institution, I'm going to let the name go, this institution is very similar to most of the other colleges. It is divided into a series of operating divisions. You have an instructional division, a student success division, you have an administrative division, you have a budget and finance division, and you have a continuing education division. Now, many schools do not have a separate continuing education division. Why, you might ask, does this one? Primarily because in the state of Maryland, students who take non-credit courses, if they are related to personal development for a career or reconditioning them to put them back in the workforce, those are counted and generate state funding in exactly the same way that the credit courses do. There are only 6 states in the United States that do that, which is kind of interesting. It operates on the basis, as do all the Maryland schools, of 2 fiscal years. You have the July 1 to June 30, which is the state fiscal year and the county fiscal year. But then you also deal with the federal government from a variety of sources, predominantly, I guess you would say, in this case, financial aid. But there are other things. And that is a September 1 to August 30th detail. Okay, so how do we build the budget in this particular state? A lot of this will follow what you find in your text. The activity that is initiated usually sometime right after this may sound strange, but right after the start of the new fiscal year. One of the things you begin to do is to plan for the upcoming fiscal year. This way you have roughly a year to get the entire system together. So within each of those 5 areas that I mentioned, there are subset divisions that have budgets. In credit, for example, you would have the traditional academic divisions, some technical divisions. In student success, you have counseling, you have admissions. Those are some of theirs. Continuing education has those which are specifically related to the credit generation that I mentioned earlier, and some that are not. Those that are recreational or avocational do not count. So what happens is whoever heads that division, and at the college it's often called, at this college it's called the division head, or in the case of a couple of them, it is a director. They begin to build their budget. And where you usually start, because this is not a zero-sum budget, you'll learn about those. This is not a cost benefit. I mean, if you generate a certain amount, you get back a certain amount. That's also talked about in your textbook. That is not functioning here. It's strictly you start with the base of last year, because no budget, as you will quickly find out when you build them, maybe some of you are already building them, you never get everything you ask for. So you start looking at what you got the preceding year, or the year you're operating in, if you will, and determine what you did not get, and you look at the rationale that was given to you for not getting it. And you have to either decide, well, we're not going to get this, so we'll give up on it. And what we will basically do is either put something else in or start from something that needs to be expanded from where it once was. Okay, the next thing we need to talk about is the steps after that. And they're very interesting. Maryland has a system that is quite common across the country. The first thing that happens is that each of those divisions has a senior director. In instruction, it's a vice president. In student services, it happens to be a dean. In continuing education, it is a director. In administration, that is the one that is largely put together by the president in concert with the vice president for financial services. And the fifth one comes largely, I believe that's also called a director. But each of those people takes what their colleagues, what their, as we call them, what their reports tell them. There's a meeting, you review it, you try to reach a consensus. I will say it, smaller schools, it's much easier. I've worked at multi-campus institutions, and it's much harder to get that kind of agreement, just because you have another layer of bureaucracy with which you have to wrestle. Okay, at this institution, what happens is that each of the area directors, like the vice president of instruction or the dean of students, then meets with the president's cabinet, which in this case is their 4 colleagues and the president. And very often the president will bring in more than just the vice president for finance. He will bring in the director of financial services may be brought in. Also, there's a very critical position that is, at some places it's as high as a vice president. At this place, it is a dean of planning. And that individual comes in to which we'll talk why that person comes in just a minute. So then there is an ongoing discussion, and you make your presentation, and the president says thank you very much, and you leave. And then there's a meeting subsequently. All this is usually going on. The presentations are usually made in February to the very early March. Then from the mid-March to the end of March, the president's cabinet meet, and they decide what essentially can be funded, what's not going to be funded, and then they bring everybody back together subsequently later. I'm not going to talk about that now. We talk about what else you have to do. The community colleges in the state of Maryland have boards. Most of these boards are appointed by the governor in consultation with however many state senators there are that serve the particular district of the college. In the case of this college, it's 3 senators. So they'll have a board. Usually it's 7 or 9 members. I think the one at the school we're talking about is 9. That board then meets they're given a couple of weeks to digest the budget, and then the president, sometimes he or she brings the entire cabinet. Sometimes they only bring the vice president for finance and then some other financial people. And they go through the budget. And the board finally has to agree to what is done. Obviously, if you think about it as a pyramid, at the bottom there's a great deal requested. It's cut at the area level. It's cut again at the board level. And then the budget goes a couple of places. First of all, since county commissions or county councils or whatever they're called, in this county it's called a commission. Other counties, they call them councils. It doesn't matter.